There's a suit on and there's places to go.
Hey, Kujin.
Hey, forget about it.
The topic of today, I thought of the Singles soundtrack. You went and watched the movie. Had you seen the movie before? I assume you had, or you just wanted to rewatch it to get the vibe.
Yeah, I'd seen it a couple of times back in the day. I figured, it would be nice to dive in just to see how it had aged because I only remembered a couple of parts, but it was interesting. It's not a very good movie.
You don't think so?
It's all right. I mean, it's okay. I think maybe it just hasn't aged as well as the music. Like, it's not his best work. I think my issue with the movie is that it reminds me of like Friends, the movie.
Singles came out in 92, right?
It was shot in the spring of 91. I'm not sure when the movie came out, but I know that the soundtrack came out in like the summer or the fall of 91. Like it came out way before.
And that was before Friends was on the air, right? Friends, I want to say, came out around like 93 or 94.
Yeah, it was around that time, yeah.
There's a nostalgia factor that's really important, but I don't think they're that repellent. I think they're just not his most fleshed out characters. I was thinking there's a movie in this sort of grouping where there are like really actually repellent characters. High Fidelity is a movie where I found the characters to be repellent. That kind of ruined. Well, there's a lot of things that ruin High Fidelity. We could talk about High Fidelity another episode, but Singles, they're flawed. There's a quirkiness to them, and maybe the quirkiness doesn't totally work out, but I think the overall ambience of Seattle, there's a certain charm to it that lets you overlook maybe either the not totally fleshed out characters or the sort of unappealing aspect of the characters that you seem to be.
Yeah, they're just kind of, some of them are kind of waspy. I think that was my thing. It's like I just didn't really relate to, I mean, obviously I could relate to Matt Dillon's character, but the main characters, I think I was just having a hard time clinging on to him. In High Fidelity, I could understand why you would say that about those characters, but the writing is better and kind of over the top that it just makes it feel
less serious.
Less serious, but also like I can relate to a not serious person. I can't relate to a boring, underwritten character of a dude with he's got a tie on. I don't want to rip Singles too much because I think it's that movie's more about the vibe and the time capsule aspect than anything else.
I see it as sort of a necessary kind of failed attempt to do what I think he did really well on Almost Famous.
Yes.
I think in Almost Famous, the band is ground zero and he works his way out from that. And it's not relying on the soundtrack. There's a nostalgia for the age and time, but it's really the ensemble. Singles is taking the sort of semi-bohemian, they're kind of post-yuppie characters, the two main people that are in the relationship. I can't remember their names, but they're on the peripheral of the rock thing, whereas in Almost Famous, the rock thing is where it's all taking place and it's stretching out, and pretty much everybody in that thing is really... it's way more captivating. Almost Famous, I think he kind of realized like the music and the band and the people who create the music, that's the thing. And I've been around these people because, he wrote for Rolling Stone. So I think he just put that at ground zero and worked his way out. And if Singles is like a 3.5-star movie, and maybe I'm being generous there, Almost Famous is kind of like a 5-star movie.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. What are your thoughts on that vanilla rom-com versus the feral soundtrack angle? And do you think that was purposeful or do you think that was just accidental?
I think the vanilla rom-com, I think it tames the music scene. I think that it also creates a wild juxtaposition because remember there's the scene where she's like, will we still go out dancing? And then it cuts to them being out there on the floor when Alice in Chains is playing. And they're like, we'll always go dancing. That is a really like Friends kind of moment, you know, but it's to the backdrop of like Alice in Chains. I sort of think that either he had to pitch the movie saying this is a romantic comedy and it's set to this backdrop because like, he really wanted to feature the Seattle thing. Either he did that because he felt that that was the way the studios would pick up the project and fund it, or he actually was self-conscious and concerned that just the scene itself would not carry the movie. And he didn't want to make a documentary. You have to give him that. It really enervates the Seattle scene. But I think it does it in a way that's ultimately kind of charming. And I think the dancing scene is really funny. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. But then there's other scenes where you get to have Chris Cornell and Eddie Vedder and these guys poking fun at themselves in a way that I don't think they were ready to do with, you know, the press at the time. And so I think that was a good thing that really came out of it. Because if they were in a documentary, they would have to sort of be on. I mean, they could kind of be deflating themselves. But I think in the context of this movie by a guy that they kind of know, and it's sort of this generic romantic comedy that's set in Seattle, I think that it let people's guards drop down and they were like, yeah, let's have fun with this.
Those bands hadn't broken yet either. They were still there was like a simmering, but I'm trying to think 91. Bad Motorfinger hadn't come out yet, right? In 91?
Well, I don't know.
I think that was like 92, wasn't it?
It might have, but Pearl Jam was 10 out already?
No. Nevermind wasn't even out. The movie got released. It got dropped right when Nevermind was popping off. Nevermind was like the fall or winter of 91. The film was shot in the spring of 91. And I think the soundtrack was released somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, so I guess they didn't have that overexposure, you know. So, and if that was the case too, then yeah, definitely Cameron Crowe felt like he had to have this thing in a rom-com or people would not be interested.
Let's talk about some of the songs on the official track list. What are your favorites?
I want to say something off the bat. I have the deluxe edition of the single soundtrack, and I'll get into kind of the significance of that in a little bit. But I thought that it was really interesting that Cameron Crowe tapped Paul Westerberg to do the primary music, like writing some original material for the movie. And he's got like 3 Paul Westerberg songs on here. Paul Westerberg also did some sort of like incidental music for different scenes, probably like guitar and stuff. I thought that was a really interesting choice. And then Cameron Crowe also really, I read, maybe it was in this booklet for this CD, or maybe it was somewhere else. He talked about how Paul Westerberg was just like incredibly professional and that he was just so great to work with. I've known people that were like Replacements fans and really hated the Paul Westerberg stuff like Dyslexic Heart. What's the other one? Waiting for Somebody and stuff. I like the Replacements. I don't like all Paul Westerberg solo stuff, but I think that it was a really interesting choice to tap him for the soundtrack. And I think that the songs that he got to do on here, they're good tunes. I like the fact that they got Mudhoney in there to do Overblown.
My favorite Mudhoney song.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then I think this soundtrack is what made Screaming Trees.
Yeah,
like,
for
as
sure.
much as they got made. But, right? I mean, like, I Nearly Lost You. That made them.
A lot of my favorite songs from these bands are on here. The Smashing Pumpkins song, Drown, one of my favorite songs of theirs. Not on any album. It's like peak Siamese Dream era sound. Like it's that obviously Alice in Chains song is awesome. That Chris Cornell acoustic song is so dope.
Okay, so now this is a bit of trivia. I don't know if you know this. There's a scene where Matt Dillon's character decides to go solo and do an acoustic career. I think because like the breakup or something, he gets like kind of moody.
Oh, he
So
quit Citizen Dick.
Yeah, he quits Citizen Dick. He's going to be like a folky guy, and he has these like folky songs, right? They did a whole little scene. They shot a whole scene of him doing like being out on the street corner playing acoustic, and there was a shot of his cassette tape that he was selling, and it was like the old school Maxell tapes, and the song titles were on there, right? Cameron Crowe got a Maxell tape and he wrote like 6 or 7 song titles on this thing. And that was what was used in the shot. Okay. Chris Cornell saw that tape. I guess it was lying around somewhere, and he went off and he wrote the songs based on those titles. So Seasons was one of those songs that Matt Dillon's character was going to record. And it was so good that Cameron Crowe was like, I'm putting this in the movie, right?
Wow.
Now, if you get the deluxe 2 CD set that I have,
you get all the songs?
Yes, the other 4 or 5 songs that Chris Cornell wrote. One of them was Flutter Girl, which made it onto his first solo album,
Euphoria
Morning, which is a great album.
I love that album so goddamn much, dude. I'm glad you brought it up.
So there's an early version of it on here, and then there's, I think Spoon Man was one of those tracks that was written there. So Chris basically saw the cassette that Matt Dillon's character was hawking at his acoustic shows, goes and writes the songs as a goof. Seasons is one of them, right? Flutter Girl is one of them. Spoon Man is one of them. Like, how high on fire artistically was Chris Cornell at this point in his life? It's insane. He was so talented, dude.
Temple of the Dog, too, man. Think about that.
Yeah, Seasons makes it into the movies because it's so good. And then on this deluxe reissue, I think part of the reason I bought this reissue, the 2 CD one, was because I was like, I want to hear the other 4 tunes, dude, because I'm like, that's like something that I aspire to do, where your buddy like has a bunch of song titles and you're like, okay, and you go off and you write all the songs. Other songwriters would like kill to write something like Seasons. It's such a great tune, and he just wrote it on a lark.
So I was going to say, you were talking about Paul Westerberg. I felt like the Paul Westerberg songs encapsulated the tone of the movie better than any of the other songs.
There was a thing I read. I had like one of those, Uncut and Mojo. They'd occasionally do these like legacy issues, and they'd have like Nirvana, and you pay $17 for this thing, but it's like a book. And there was a thing that I read in one of those, either Mojo or Uncut, one of those special editions. It was an archival thing, and they talked about how some of the grunge bands were playing in England after grunge was big. I think Nirvana was even out there too, and there was like some festival or something. And they talked about the grunge bands, it's like 92, 93. They're all kind of just a little disheveled rock and roll. They're playing kind of sloppy, and Nirvana played kind of sloppy. And then the reporter says, yeah, and strangely enough, Paul Westerberg got on there with his band, and it was like he had them so dialed in that he was going to like hit them if they made a mistake. So because he's older than those guys, he'd been through the ringer, and he learned his lesson about you be a crazy sloppy rock star and you lose out on like opportunities. So I think he was at this phase where he's older and he's like, I'm not fucking this up, dude. I think that's really where he was after the Replacements. I think he was just really like, I'm not messing this up. He's like, I've had my heyday of being a lunatic and I'm not going to blow it. Right. But I want to say also that I think that the Pearl Jam songs on here are my favorite Pearl Jam songs.
They're just like B-sides too. They didn't make 10. None of them made it onto 10. They were just kind of the first batch of songs that they had done. That's pretty cool, man. I don't know. I've always liked both of those songs. Do you think a 90s Seattle style scene could even exist today?
I say no. Just like with Songcraft, you can't have everything in the song that's really appealing and exciting and grabs you about a song. You can't have it all out there all at once, right? It has to be kind of curated and presented to the listener in a crafted, sophisticated sort of way. There's degrees of sophistication, of course, right? I think that the problem why you won't have that scene is because on a grander scale than just a simple song or something, there's scenes for sure, right? But you don't have the scene slowly trickling into the mainstream that would warrant people that hear it to go and start looking and making an effort on their own to go and find this music and track it down. No, what happens is it's much more sort of, as Zizek would say, obscene. You are bombarded with what the new thing is. There's no like nooks and crannies for you to investigate. You don't need to see the movie to enjoy the soundtrack. But listening to the soundtrack and knowing about grunge and Seattle in the 90s and stuff, for young people today, it can inspire a lot of questions and a lot of like searching in the way that it did for us, but in a way that I don't think anybody that's coming up and doing music and being part of a scene could do now, or it would happen with now. So what's your answer to the question?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see it happening in the same way, mostly just because there's no pre-internet incubation anymore. Like you said, it's just like immediate. Just
Yeah.
immediately, if something pops, it's just you're gonna know about it. There's no local radio pushing anything. I mean, there's local radio and that matters, but just not in the same way anymore. People aren't listening to college radio the way that they used to. Even back in like 2010, people were listening to college radio in a different way.
Yes, and I want to say something about that because sometimes when I was working for O'Reilly's and I was driving, sometimes I'd put on KXLU. The thing about KXLU, and this really started probably about 15 years ago, and it's still going on there, is this idea that they really are trying to show off their eclectic musical taste. They'll be like, no one would anticipate me playing a Bad Brain song and then an Arthur Russell song, and then a Bell and Sebastian song, and then a Rudimentary Penny song.
They're flexing.
It's what the kids call a flex. But you know what I'm saying? It's more about showing off what random shuffle you can do and how cool you are than it is about legitimately being enthusiastic about the music you're playing. I think you can have healthy scenes. I'd like to think that healthy scenes are out there to be had.
Can you have a healthy scene in Los Angeles?
I think in certain pockets, but I think you can have certain bands come out of Los Angeles that are really good. Strangely enough, I think there's a healthy black metal scene in Los Angeles, especially East LA.
Really?
But that's not something that's, going to cross over or be something. But yeah, you could go out there and you'll see a lot of the same people and stuff. And, we were part of a scene too. We would go to Lot 1, go to Spaceland, all these different places and see a lot of the same people. But none of those people made any money off of that. And now it's pretty much gone, right? I mean,
I'm struggling to find that here now. I mean, there's bands that play together, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of connective tissue. It's just bands playing together and then they go their separate ways and that's it, which is fine. It's weird, man. It's a very disconnecting feeling, and I don't know if that's just because we're not plugged in the same way we were before, but it's interesting.
Well, there was a sense of camaraderie. I think this does lead to the Nirvana issue. I think that the bands that were on this soundtrack, I think they had a kind of camaraderie outside of the Paul Westerberg thing and the Jimi Hendrix thing, which I think is there to add a certain kind of historical credibility to, the Seattle scene musically. I think that the Alice in Chains, Screaming Trees, Mudhoney. I think it really was sort of like the people that were still kicking around Seattle. Because it's not, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not really a sub-poppy kind of soundtrack. Like, I mean, Mudhoney, yes. But the vibe, the Alice in Chains, the Screaming Trees,
Smashing Pumpkins.
Smashing Pumpkins. It's not a sub. Most people, when they look at grunge mixes and stuff, you get the sub pop vibe. There's not a sub pop vibe to this soundtrack. It's an alternate universe. It's nice that you have something that really captures this aspect of Seattle, but it doesn't have the main hallmark band, Nirvana. The Nirvana thing was kind of a spectacular thing. It's a spectacle. The Fame was a spectacle.
I can't even fathom what the movie would be like had they done it. I just can't see any universe where Nirvana is a part of this movie in any way.
Yeah, and it doesn't suffer for it at all. In fact, not having Nirvana in it is a strength. It shows that scene up there was really its own thing. It was really powerful. I was going to see if there was other scenes where you could say, well, if you took the major band out of it, would it be the same?
Which I'm trying to think.
Say you did a 60s documentary and you had some people from EMI or something say, you can't play any Beatles music and you can't even mention the Beatles in this movie. And you cut all that out. I think that would be really noticeable.
No, for sure. But they weren't really the big band in that scene, though. That was more the Byrds, the Doors.
You're talking about the
LA
scene in the 60s.
Yeah, because you brought up the Sunset Strip. So I was like, that scene in the 60s, Zappa, Love, the Doors.
If you did that movie about like that Buffalo Springfield, Zappa, the Doors, the Byrds, all that stuff, but you weren't allowed to mention the Beatles or they influenced the Beatles or any of that stuff, I think that it would be weird. Yeah, I think it would be weird.
And they were around. I don't necessarily think they were playing it a lot. They were always around. Lennon was there all the time. I mean, they were all just staying up on Laurel Canyon and whatnot. So yeah, you're right. You're right. That would be weird.
Yeah. Whereas with this thing, it's like, yeah, dude, the big band is missing. If Nirvana was on the soundtrack, I think it would be kind of jarring. And I think I mentioned to you, it's kind of funny that Nirvana decides to do a song on the Beavis and Butthead soundtrack,
Yeah, it's a great song too. I love that song.
Kurt had a certain flippancy and he liked to really challenge people's preconceived notions. And one of the reels you posted from our page, the one where he's talking about how the 3-chord grunge thing is done and, Nirvana's moving on. Yeah, I think that he liked to do things that really were just going to like be unconventional and really challenge the audience. And I think he really got a kick out of that, and he was iconoclastic in that way.
Everybody that describes that entire band always talks about how funny they were and how ridiculous they were. And so I think that movie, even though it was a light comedy, just didn't seem to fit their vibe.
Square peg, round hole.
Now, I will say this. Move that movie to 93, the bands have broken, and there's been an established hierarchy of bands that are taking over the world. Do you think that the absence would still be the same? Would it still be kind of inconsequential?
I'd say it'd still be inconsequential. From the vibe I got, I think Cameron Crowe was living up there for a little while. He got to know a lot of the bands, and there was no expectations of getting huge, but he really loved the music. He's really good at championing bands that he wants to see get bigger. He wanted to do his rom-com, but he also wanted to get all these bands in there and have this scene. He's probably kind of more of a clean-cut guy, so approaching the Seattle scene from the rom-com angle, it gets more of the PG-13 aspect of the scene. That might have been Cameron Crowe's experience, because I don't get the vibe that he was doing drugs and getting blackout drunk and, doing some of the seedier stuff. I kind of get the vibe that he's He's just a little bit more. He got to write for Rolling Stone when he was a teenager, so he was always kind of precocious. So I get the vibe that it's a little bit more wholesome. And the Nirvana thing was pretty daring. And it is really a love letter to Seattle as a whole. Because, a lot of the other themes are in the movie, the coffee shops, the cameo with the basketball player,
Xavier McDaniel.
and then the train and all that stuff. It's not just this music scene. It's really about Seattle, the city. And he really does, I think, it's maybe not the best love story within that love letter, but it is still a love letter to Seattle.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, now that you've sort of laid it out, I do realize, I think because of our darker proclivities, my opinion of the rewatch was sort of just colored by the fact that I'm more interested in the scene anyway, like the music aspect of it, thinking about how it could have been more centered around the darker aspects of that, but nobody wants to fucking see that in the early 90s anyway. That hasn't entered into the public zeitgeist yet, what the heaviness of that scene, and that wouldn't have made as good of a movie anyway. So I'm gonna watch the movie again with new eyes, sir.
Why are you always the one who's out of step? Is there something the matter with you? You were just standing there in the hall the next day, the way you always are, and you heard the girls talking. You thought they